Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive! This week, I continue my series talking about the major factions of Starfleet battles by talking about the fourth major faction, the Kzinti. What makes the Kzinti sort of interesting is they are not originally a Star Trek race. They were licensed from the creator of them, Larry Niven, who wrote a series of short story anthologies called the Man-Kzin Wars. And they got worked into Starfleet battles mostly because they were something different. They provided a different angle for the game. And so, sit back, relax, and enjoy as I talk about the Kzinti. When one starts looking at the Kzinti ships, the first thing that stands out is that they have 3 warp nacelles. Now, these are not on the par of the Federation or Klingon main nacelles. Instead, these 3 nacelles between them have the same amount of power as 2 Federation warp nacelles. But, of course, considering you take into account that you're rolling for random locations where you hit, this means that you can spread that damage between those 3 nacelles, rather than lose half your power. By losing 1 nacelle, you're losing a third of your power. The next thing you notice is, ultimately, they don't have a lot of power to them. We've got their battle cruiser has 30 power from its warp, 3 from its reactor, and 3 from its impulse. So you're looking at 36 power. It's comparable to a Federation cruiser, but it's still not a huge amount. And remember, in Starfleet battles, everything comes down to managing your power. Overall, the shields are sort of like the Klingon shields, as in they're weaker on the back, heavier on the front. But they're still a little bit heavier all around than Klingon shields. You'll notice that they have, on many of their ships, a bunch of drone racks. So, again, you can kind of draw parallels to the Klingons. Where they get interesting is their weaponry. Again, like the Klingons, they have a lot of beam weaponry. They have the battlecruiser, for example, has 2 forward-firing and left arc-firing phaser 1s, has a midship 360-degree turreted phaser 1, then has left side firing and right side firing, covering the entire sides, front, side, and rear. Phaser 3s, 2 on each side. 4 on each side. But, again, that's kind of not a big deal per se. But then you look and you see it's got forward arc firing and right and left side firing disruptors. 2 on each side. So, at this point, the quick look at a Kzinti battle cruiser or their command cruiser, which its big difference is it has a bigger reactor and does not have as many drones. No, not that it does not have drones, it just does not have as many drones. They're pretty much comparable to Klingon cruisers. Except, of course, for the 360-degree arc firing Phaser 1. But what sets the Kzinti apart from any other faction starting off? Now understand, all the other factions do have ships like what I'm about to talk about, but the Kzinti are the only ones who introduce them immediately. And Kzinti ships of this type, later introduced ones, tend to double down on this. The Kzinti have two unique ships. The Kzinti Strike Carrier and the Kzinti Carrier. These ships... Alright, so their warp engines aren't quite as strong. Or, should I say, the Kzinti Carrier doesn't have as much power from its warp engines, though it does have faster impulse engines. And the Kzinti Strike Carrier, it has about the same warp engines as the battle cruiser and command cruiser, but also has a little bit of extra power from its impulse engines. So let's take a look at sort of the big baddie of them, the Kzinti Strike Carrier. If we go with just what it carries compared to the other cruisers, it has the same warp power and has a grand total of 1 extra power compared to the strike cruiser, to the battle cruiser. It has the same number of drone racks. It has overall the same overall weaponry, sort of. It's got 4 Phaser 3s on each side, 2 forward-firing Phaser 1s, 4 forward and side-firing disruptors. It's got 3 360-degree firing Phaser 1s. And it has 3 360-degree firing Phaser 3s. Its shields are a little bit lighter, though, especially in the front. Overall, it has the same amount of drones that it can launch. But here's what separates the Kzinti. This ship, the Kzinti Strike Carrier, has 12 fighters. And each fighter is armed with 2 Phaser 3s. Now, the Kzinti Carrier, the lighter carrier, you could kind of think of the Strike Carrier as a mainline carrier and the Kzinti Carrier as an escort carrier. because the Kzinti carrier is a little lighter, and oh yeah, it kind of has a little bit less armament. Actually, correction on that. Its lesser armament is that it only has 2 forward-firing disruptors. Everything else, in terms of beam weaponry, is the same. It also has less drones. It does, however, have 12 fighters. These are lighter fighters, though. These fighters only have 1 Phaser 3 each. And yes, that is the distinguishing factor of the Kzinti. The Kzinti have carriers. They have the game-changing thing in Starfleet battles. A Federation task force, you might see a dreadnought and a couple destroyers. The Kzinti might have a strike carrier and a couple of their light cruisers, or a strike carrier and one of their battle cruisers. And then it's like, what are you gonna deal with? Because the weaponry on these ships, in and of themselves, is nasty, especially the carriers. The carriers can fight. They do not need their fighters. But they launch their fighters. Here's what's going to happen to the Feds. Say you've got the Dreadnought and 2 destroyers versus a strike carrier and a battle cruiser. The battle cruiser is going to go after 1 destroyer. The fighters are going to go after the other destroyer. By that point, that engagement should be over fairly quick. The destroyer's taken apart. And then, once the destroyers are gone, the Kzinti ships are going to go after that dreadnought. And what's going to go after that dreadnought? The drones are going to be launched towards the dreadnought. The fighters, any fighters that survive taking on the destroyer, are going to be going after the dreadnought. And then you're going to be having 2 ships with firepower equivalent to Klingon D7s going after that dreadnought. Sure, they've probably taken some hits, but they're still going to have firepower to go after that dreadnought. And that's still a fairly even fight overall. And that is the Kzinti. The Kzinti are not like the other factions. I would be more inclined to say the Kzinti forces are the ones most likely to function like a real-world naval group, where you will have a carrier and escort ships for that carrier. And the carrier is the linchpin because of its fighters, but also because of its drones. Because, yes, the Kzinti, like the Klingons, do also love their drones. And that is overall my look at the Kzinti. Next week, I'm going to look at the last of the major factions. The last faction to get a significant number of ships. The Gorn. Then the following week, I'm going to conclude it by talking about the Atholians and Orions, who have between them 3 ships. So until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.